Welcome back to the Law&Crime Network, everybody. This is Jesse Weber. Thanks for joining us today. We're replaying clips from the Todd Kenhammer case out of Wisconsin, where that man, as you've been hearing all this morning, was found guilty of intentional first-degree murder. We'll replay clips from that amazing testimony, that amazing day from yesterday. We'll replay everything about that. But right now, we do want to change our focus. We do have a special segment for you today about sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, not just in the entertainment industry, but also the restaurant industry. It's prevalent. It's happening every week. We hear new allegations, new people coming forward. It's really, really disturbing, and we want to break it down for you a little bit about what's happening. I'm really happy because we're joined by a very special guest. We're joined by Neil Mullin, who's the senior partner of Smith Mullin PC, and Mr. Mullin actually represents Gretchen Carlson in connection with her disputes with Fox News. Mr. Mullin, it's great to have you here on the Law&Crime Network.
Great to be here, Jesse. Thank you.
So, as I want to start off, we have a lot to talk about. I want to first talk about the restaurant industry. We saw this past week that acclaimed chef Mario Batali, allegations were thrown forth against him, and he admitted a lot of it. He admitted certain things. And not only that, it came out that there is a restaurant in Manhattan called the Spotted Pig, and the owner of this restaurant, Ken Friedman, the allegations have been asserted against him as well. Not just simple allegations. We're talking really deep, disturbing allegations. In fact, there is a lounge at the top part of this Spotted Pig restaurant that has been nicknamed the Rape Room. I would love your thoughts about these latest allegations against people in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, I think the restaurant industry is a bastion of sexual harassment and abuse, and has been for years, and has flown under the radar. It's great it's coming out now. I mean, when you think about it, you have waitresses get it from two sides. You get it from the kitchen, which is mainly literally like a locker room, a high-pressure, male-dominated place dominated by a big ego chef where testosterone meets power. And then on the other side, you got the customers, the clientele coming in and making remarks and even touching waitresses. So we see this. It's very prevalent. It's been ignored. The federal law doesn't apply to enterprises that have 15 employees or less. Often they fly under the radar of the federal law. So it's something that really has to be dealt with. But more generally, look, there's an awakening going on in this country. Ever since a president who bragged about grabbing women's private parts got elected, and there were 1 million women showed up the day after inauguration in Washington, there's been an awakening. This is a long, simmering, painful era of sexual harassment and abuse is being challenged now. So it's great. Every industry has to be looked at.
Let's talk a little bit about this harassment in the restaurant industry specifically. There is a quote from a woman that worked at this establishment, the Spotted Pig, and I'm going to read it to you. And tell me, does this not just summarize the whole sexual harassment environment? In the moment, you're not thinking at it at all. He's your boss. You don't punch him. You just don't kiss back and pull away and try to shake it off. Is that not the ideal statement of what people are going through, women are going through in this kind of environment?
That's the core. You know, often in the restaurant industry, women are very low paid, especially, say, if they're not in the Spotted Pig, but in a diner or something like that. And remember that almost all employees in the United States are at-will employees. A lot of folks don't get that. You can be fired at any time for no reason or any reason, without notice and without severance pay. So the middle class, the working class generally is hanging on by their fingernails. So when we ask ourselves, why did a woman put up with this? What was she supposed to do? She has children to feed. She has rent to pay. Most women in the workplace, most employees in the workplace, don't have real opportunities to stand up to a powerful sexually harassing boss. That quote you just read really encapsulates that.
And I think, you know, what would help so much, since we're talking about this and we have the time to talk about it, what for people to understand a little bit, because there's sexual misconduct, it's broken up, I think, into harassment and assault. Assault really is the worst of the two in the sense that involves some sort of physical contact. But when you talk about harassment, what is it important for restaurant owners, for restaurant patrons, for people to understand what rises to the level of harassment? Because they might think they make an off-color remark. They might think they might not be doing anything, but they don't realize really what the implications of it are. So if you mind just explaining a little bit from a legal perspective, what do we mean when we say harassment?
Sure. Just yesterday, Rupert Murdoch tried to dismiss everything that happened at Fox as what he called flirty behavior. That's ridiculous, and that's an obscenity viewed against the backdrop of what happened to the victims there. Sexual harassment is when a person is targeted by an employer or a coworker because of their gender, because of their sex, with words or physical contact that is unwanted. That's the key. It's unwanted. Where there's a mutual exchange, no problem. I always say, you know sexual harassment when you see it. Ask yourself this question. If you're a man, would I want to say this to my sister or my mother? Would I want someone to say this to my sister or my mother in their workplace? Would I want them to lay hands on in that manner to my sister or mother? If the answer is no, don't do it. Don't do it. This is not rocket science. It's when it's non-consensual. That's the essential element. Another element. Women, unlike men, go through life fearful of and experiencing sexual assault. That's a reality in the lives of the women we love and respect. It's so sad, but it's been going on for hundreds of years. So because of that experience, women view comments and actions in a way that's different, through a different lens than men. Some courts say sexual harassment is conduct that is unwanted and offensive when viewed from the standpoint of a reasonable woman. Okay, that's something else to think of. And men should try to step into the shoes of women, who are often physically weaker than the men who are harassing them. The 6'5" Bill O'Reilly, for example. Men should be aware of how they come across, the power they exude. And then when they have executive positions, the power to hire and fire, they exude even more power. So the basic thing is, where there's a lack of consent, where conduct is directed at a woman that is offensive and that is based on sex and has a sexual element, whether it be touching or words, that's illegal sexual harassment.
What's amazing is that this kind of pattern goes on when you see a sexual harassment pattern, and I try to make sense of it. How does this fly under the radar, or how is this people turn a blind eye? I want to read you something, and I need you to explain it to me because I'm not sure I get it. You're much smarter than I am, so I'm going to read this.
I don't know that, but I'll try my best.
The restaurant group in question that we're talking about, the Spotted Pig, the restaurant group's partner and star chef, April Bloomfield, denied turning a blind eye. She said, in the two matters involving uninvited approaches that were brought to my attention over the years, she's speaking about Mr. Friedman here, I immediately referred both to our outside labor counsel, and they were addressed internally. I've spoken to Ken about professional boundaries and relied on him to uphold our policies. Nonetheless, I feel we have let down our employees, and for that I sincerely apologize. I need you to explain to me what that exactly means, because there's a way to address it and there's a way not to address it. You bring it up to your outside counsel, nothing seemed to work here. What's going on?
That's an owner that is basically doing a CYA move. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that fully on the air, okay? So often you see CYA moves, right, where they're just covering for themselves, right? So they say, look, what do you want from me? I took it to my lawyer. I took it to my human resources department. We did a little investigation. What do you want from me? I don't sue the company. You want to sue the harasser individually. So what we have is, throughout the workplaces in the United States, generally a failure by human resources departments, a failure by the executives to take meaningful steps to stop sexual harassment. You need to have independent investigators to come in when there's serious sexual harassment. They have to be people who are not beholden to the company, who are not beholden to the executives, who are willing to make it, call it like they see it. Human resources departments are there to defend the company. When a victim of sexual harassment goes to the human resources department, they may be compassionate, they may be nice, but by the time they get through processing that woman's statement, that statement is going to be screwed up. And when I get it as a lawyer, it's almost as if she's given up the accurate description of what happened to her. So it's extremely important for your listeners to understand that if they're sexually harassed in the workplace, before you go to human resources, before you're interviewed by the company's lawyers, come to an employment lawyer, a plaintiff's employment lawyer. There is a National Employment Lawyers Association which has members all across the United States that has been at the forefront of the effort to end sexual harassment in the workplace. And another thing to remember is this. When sexual harassment is happening, you may be in a state where you are allowed to record it. For example, in New York and in New Jersey, it's legal for a person to tape record surreptitiously a conversation to which she is a party, even if the other side doesn't know. In California, it's illegal, unfortunately, to do that. But in New York and New Jersey, run your tape recorders. run your recorders, make a record, take a photograph of the obscene document that's hanging on a bulletin board. If the guy next to you is running pornography, take a screenshot. We're in an age where this kind of evidence is one of the reasons we're seeing a sea change. This kind of evidence is what's given rise to some of the big cases that is shaking the world. And so that's something for folks to remember also.
As disturbing as it is to hear about this sexual harassment in the workplace, and again, Mr. Friedman, I mean, I can read the allegations after allegations when he inappropriately touched women, kissed them, groped them, but he also took actions towards their careers and tried to blacklist them and threaten them. And we're going to talk about that later when we talk about Harvey Weinstein, but that's another level that we reach where it's not only the inappropriate touching, but the threats and the blackballing and threatening to ruin their careers. Right. I mean, we talk about that level, and then let's also talk about the fact about Mario Batali, the other level, where he actually, they called him the Red Menace in this restaurant group because he would actually physically touch women and at one point was kissing a woman that was unconscious. So what do you think about this level? I mean, this rises to another level that I can't even believe I'm saying on the air.
We're talking about two separate topics, both of them important, and I'm glad you have raised them, Jesse. One is the big topic of retaliation. What happens when a woman raises issues of sexual harassment or turns down the boss's, coming on to her? What happens? What frequently happens, we all know. That woman gets fired. And that woman in an industry like Hollywood gets blackballed. That woman doesn't get a job yet. Women who have filed these suits have ended their careers. Their careers, I should say, have been ended by industry retaliation. It's the whole industry. Look at Kaepernick not getting signed onto a team, right? If you want to see an example of a whole industry retaliating against a football player who took a stand, right? Imagine what happens to women when they complain about the CEOs or the head chef's harassment. That guy is going to talk to his friends, and they're going to talk to their friends. And word's going to get around that you don't hire this woman. Think of all the thousands and tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of women who have lost their jobs because of sexual harassment. First, they suffered emotionally and physically because of what was done to them in the workplace, and then they complain about it, and then they're fired on some pretense. Usually they're fired on some pretense. You were rude to a customer, or you didn't fill out this form properly. And so that's a big issue. So remember this, that there are rights against retaliation. State and federal laws prohibit retaliation. And one of the things a lawyer will do is assert those rights, okay, in court. Now, you've probably heard that tens of millions of employees have been forced to sign mandatory arbitration agreements. Fox did that, right? Where instead of having a right to an open and public trial that would shame and embarrass and expose these harassers, you're forced into what we call secret corporate courts. Usually it's a male arbitrator selected by one of these agencies like the American Arbitration Association. You have a hearing in a little closed office. Mm-hmm. You don't have the same rights to the rules of evidence and so on that you do in a court. And then you have a decision usually against you. 80% of the time it comes out the wrong way. Or if you win a pittance and nothing is done. So right now there's a law that's being introduced in Congress to try to end mandatory secret arbitration for women who are victims of sexual harassment. It's bipartisan. Gretchen Carlson and my partner Nancy Erica Smith have been down there working on it. It's moving forward. So look, if you're subject not only to sexual harassment but also retaliation, right? You're fired because you raised it. You have important legal rights. You've got to see an employment lawyer to do it. A lot of people make the mistake of running into the anti-discrimination agencies, like the EEOC, right? Or like the State Division on Civil Rights. That's a disaster usually. Those agencies do a horribly poor job. Okay, it's important for people to know, don't file there. Don't file there unless a lawyer suggests that's the place to start. Because there are many, many opportunities to file directly in court instead of being tangled up for years in a bureaucracy. And as you know, President Trump is staffing the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission with people who are against equal opportunity. Mm-hmm. So that commission is about to go downhill.
Yeah. So if we talk about Ken Friedman, we talk about Mario Batali, are they facing criminal liability? Are they facing some charges here in the next couple of weeks?
Look, it's possible. I don't have knowledge of that because that would be secret. That would be conducted through a grand jury. There may be grand juries sitting. I don't know. I don't have information about that. But that's something that can happen and should happen more frequently. Often this kind of touching that we call sexual harassment is also a crime. It's a crime to touch a woman, especially to touch her private parts or her breasts against her will. That's a sexual assault, and almost probably in every single state. And of course, rape is always a crime. So yes, the law enforcement authorities should take a harder look at this. Right? We saw a case recently, right, where when Cy Vance, the prosecutor in New York, failed to proceed against Harvey Weinstein, when there was clear tape-recorded evidence of him trying to force a woman into a hotel room. It was a tape recording of it. So we can say this, that the male domination of the law enforcement world takes its toll on women. We've got to get women in those positions. We've got to get men who are sensitive to these issues. This is not nothing. This is something. It's not Rupert Murdoch's flirting. We're talking about assault. We're talking about touching women's private parts, touching their breasts, sticking their tongues forcibly into their mouths. It's sad that the Me Too website has over 12 million hits from women. Mm-hmm. Women have been treated as second-class citizens around the world for time immemorial. And I guess what's happening here is something, a movement that's going to try to change that history that lasts centuries, right? We have the mass rapes taking place against the Rohingya fleeing Myanmar, for Bangladesh. Mass rapes in the Congo, reported in the New York Times the other day. We have the shooting of Malala in Afghanistan because she was a girl who wanted to learn how to read. Yeah. Across the world, we have to ask ourselves, why have women been treated so poorly? And when will men stop treating women so poorly?
It's a really, really disturbing issue, and it's good that there's a movement right now to try to correct this behavior, and we're starting from industry to industry. So we're moving from the entertainment, we're moving into the restaurant industry, and now the media industry. We'll talk about Fox News in a minute, but you did mention Harvey Weinstein, and I can't help but talk about these new allegations that came out from actress Salma Hayek, and she had written a piece and really detailing the level of sexual harassment that she faced from Harvey Weinstein, the repeated sexual harassment. In fact, she said, "I don't think he hates anything more than the word no." And she specifically talked about the absolute terror she faced from him while she was producing the movie Frida, the Frida Kahlo movie. And I want to talk a little bit about that article and the fact that at one point she even said that Harvey threatened to kill her. He says, "I can kill you." And remember, she's an aspiring actress. He's a big-time Hollywood producer. This is a new level of allegation. I mean, is it not the fact that a threat to kill her? I mean, is this spark something different in this movement? I just want your thoughts on now these new allegations from Salma Hayek.